Hey everybody, DrumKid92 here, bringing you a Talking It Out special. I am here with my brother, Shea.
What up?
What up, yo? We are going to be talking about one of the greatest games I have played in a very long time, Bioshock Infinite. This is going to be pretty spoiler-heavy, FYI.
Pretty much only going to be spoilers.
Yes, actually, yes. We're going to be talking about...
We can't talk about this game at all without talking about the entirety of the game.
That's very true. Very good point. It's definitely one of those that you mention one thing, just everything has to do with everything, and it's all just one. It's very cohesively put together, and so it's very hard to be spoiler free. But we're not going to be trying to avoid spoilers here. So just if you guys have not played the game or are one of those people that just avoids the internet until you're done with the game, this is not the podcast for you.
But let's do it after you beat the game.
Correct. Yes, absolutely. Keep it in mind because my brother and I, Shea and I, we always have very good talks about games and movies and different things like that, like books even, and comic series and all that. And I think we have very good things to say, so I'm going to let you all listen.
Smart.
Yes, I is a smart person. I is smart people. So, I guess let's just kind of jump into it. So storytelling, obviously, has always been my personal favorite part of the Bioshock series as a whole, and Infinite is obviously no exception. They've they've crafted such a rich universe, but at the same time left so much to the imagination, and it's this weird combination of the two, and it just fits together perfectly, and it just it's very hard to explain.
Well, it is. I mean, working at GameStop, we got all these people that were coming into the store, and all of us that worked there are huge Bioshock fans, and therefore we knew we were going to be huge Bioshock Infinite fans. And so when people come in like, what's coming out? Bioshock Infinite was always the answer. From like November up until the day before it came out, we were just trying to push pre-orders because we want people to play the game. And everyone's like, oh, Bioshock Infinite, is that related to Bioshock? Like, yeah. Oh, so it's like Bioshock 3? Well, no. And you know what I mean? Like, it's trying to explain. I mean, it happens before, but it's not a prequel. It's not tied to Bioshock in any specific way,
right? Which
obviously we'll get to later.
Correct.
We'll continue talking about. But a little tease there. Although if someone's listening to this, I'm sure they know what we're talking about anyway.
Right.
But
hopefully,
I just thought it was super interesting the way that this is totally a Bioshock game.
Yes.
Like, the fact that it's new characters, a new setting, a new time period, all that stuff. Take out like the fact that it's first-person shooter and you have these powers, because that's all Bioshock as well.
Right.
But just the fact that Ken Levine and Irrational guys created this universe, really is what it is, of Columbia, that in a lot of ways is the polar opposite of Rapture. You know, Rapture it's this underwater dystopian society that it's very oppressive. You constantly have the pressure of this water all around you. It could crack at any moment. And Columbia is a city in the clouds. It's what they thought could be heaven, you know? They're as close as man could get to it. And I just think it's really super interesting that even though these two things could be seen as being opposites, they share a lot of similarities with the dystopian society of, you know, Andrew Ryan with Rapture saying, I want to build this utopia. I can't do it with all these other people. I'm going to take the brightest minds I can find, make a world underwater where like we are not influenced by the outside world, the outside politics, militaries. It's just us.
Right.
And Columbia is the same way, you know. They said, we're going to take what we consider to be the best and the brightest of America, along with some Irish and black slaves to do all the menial labor, up into the clouds and rebuild the real America up there. I think it's so interesting how they managed to... I mean, it's kind of what I expected, because of Bioshock 1 is all about the world of Rapture. Well, really, like, the setting is the is the definable feature about the game. Just like this, Columbia is the definable feature about the game.
Yeah.
It is personal story, and much more personal than Bioshock 1 with the silent
I agree, yes.
But, like, Columbia is what makes this game worth playing. I mean, it took me 3 hours to get through the first, for a quote-unquote average gamer, would probably take them a half hour to play at the beginning.
Oh, same here. Yeah, it's just standing there, just looking at everything. Just like,
and I listened to all the people.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
Like, when you land on the beach and you're tasked with find Elizabeth, it took me like an hour and a half to finally get to her when she was dancing.
Yes.
Even when I saw her dancing there, I stood there and watched. I stood there and watched her dancing with all the people, listen to the music. Like, Columbia is what makes this game as great as it is.
Yeah, it's so alive.
Yeah, I mean, as solid as the shooting mechanics were, all that business, Columbia is what defines this game to me. And that's like, I don't know, like the most praise I could possibly give a game.
Right, yes. Well, and I guess you could take some negative connotations from it, but the best part about the game is not the game, and that's
sure.
We don't see enough of that.
Totally.
I mean, like the only other one I can really think of is Journey, playing through that, because it's not the game that is so interesting; it is the experience.
It's not so much what you're doing. Yeah.
Right. Yes. And just the different methods that Ken Levine and his team at Irrational had of conveying the story, and just making this truly alive, vibrant civilization up in the clouds. And they have these, it's like you're walking down a street and you're glancing into shop windows, and there are these audio logs, and it's just these little snippets into people's lives, and it just makes it fleshes it out so much more completely, because you have these points in time and space with these people you may not be familiar with or introduced in any other way, and it just gives you a much more fleshed out feeling of the world in general. And
and you're getting other people's experience of Columbia, you
right.
know, because you're getting a very one-sided experience of who Comstock is, of who Elizabeth is, of what Columbia is.
Yeah.
You know, all the like kinetoscopes or whatever you see showing all this like rampant racism, and as you walk by these like all the black guys cleaning the bathrooms, and there's one scene in particular where I mean, I don't know if you even saw it because it was just like a little side thing. As you're wandering around one of the bathrooms, I think it might have been when you were on the beach, you overhear two black guys talking to each other as they're like cleaning the floors, and you know, one of them's using all these big words like, "Oh, I can't believe they don't understand," blah blah blah, and just talking. As soon as he sees you, he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Oh yeah, I'm so sorry,
like,
massa." Yeah,
drops into that what he thinks you expect. You know, because Booker being just like a white guy, he's going to assume that he is one of those racists that wants you, or that wants him to be the servant, wants him to be doing all that stuff. And it's just, that is one of the really cool undertones of the game, that, you know, the story is not overtly about race at all. It's just one of those things that brings the world more to life. It gives it more of a sense that we can... it helps us recognize that world more with pieces of our own. Because I mean,
allows us to draw parallels.
Yeah, we didn't live in the 50s and the 60s with all the civil rights movements and all that kind of stuff, but we know all about that.
Yeah,
we know all about the struggle of the black people in the 60s, and so we can relate to that. We can't relate to a floating city in the clouds, you know.
Correct.
So there are some parts that are going to make us be able to relate more to those characters in that setting. Like, I mean, so what's an example of that was in the original Bioshock? I guess just like the advancement of science and science over everything else, evolution, the future of mankind kind of stuff. Because that's
very industrial revolution, you know, push forward at any cost kind of thing.
Yeah.
And for a game that is about a city in the clouds, it is surprisingly grounded. I think, just in its lore and its rich culture and history and everything. Just, I was flabbergasted the entire game at just the amount of depth that the development team put into it. I'd like to actually follow up this segment with a little tidbit that I noticed, because you mentioned you were on the beach. In that beach scene, I remember texting you about it, but it's the song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" is being played on one of those. It's almost like one of those crank wheel machines, and it's a small band that's playing it, of course. It just has that kind of tinny, tiny orchestrated sound. And I sat there for probably 2 or 3 minutes listening to the song until it looped, and I was like, that is totally Girls Just Want to Have Fun. That doesn't make any sense why it would be here. And then a couple days later, as I got towards the end of the game, there's a musician's house, and there's a tear open, and through the tear, the song "Girls Just Want to Have Fun" can be heard. So, and it's made clear. I think there's an audio log in there about him being a musician, and so then you realize that, oh, this guy was a musician, heard this song through the tear, and adapted it, and so they were playing it on the beach.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of examples of that, of future society kind of influencing. Because, I mean, Elizabeth has this notion of going to Paris. That is her dream. Like, that is her escape. She wants Booker to take her to Paris, and that's where everything's going to be okay.
Right.
The time that you see Paris through a tear is, like, in the 80s. Because as she opens that tear, there's a theater that's playing Return of the Jedi, I think it is.
Right, yes, yeah.
And, I mean, it's in French or whatever the title of it, but it's like whatever de Jedi or however that would be in French. But, like, that's what... Because she's never been to France. She's never known anything except Colombia. So her version of France is this future version.
Right.
Like, she doesn't know anything about it except this alternate reality.
Yeah.
I mean, that goes down a whole other rabbit hole with the tears and all that business.
Yeah, well, we'll get to that. It was one of the spine-tingling moments where I realized this moment that I had back earlier in the game was so much more relevant and so much more meaningful than I realized it was at the time. And that's, I could not get enough of that stuff in that game. Oh yeah, I want to go ahead and do this one before we move on to anything else. But the sound of Songbird dying, there's kind of this hullabaloo on the internet about this right now. You can hear it in Bioshock 1, in the Sander Cohen, I believe the Sander Cohen area. It's the death of Fitzpatrick, the guy with the dynamite around the piano. He's playing the piano.
Okay. Yeah.
Shay, you won't be able to hear it, but the listeners will be able to. But Shay, if whenever in your free time you want to look it up real quick, and I'll talk about it a little bit. But I'm going to go ahead and play that for you guys right now. And just
listen. Like a YouTube video of it?
Yes, it's just a YouTube video. It's actually on IGN's thing.
I'm going to look it up right now.
Yeah, Bioshock. It's Bioshock Death of Fitzpatrick
like
gameplay.
Hyphen?
Yeah, hyphen. Death of Fitzpatrick. And Fitz with a Z, obviously. So I'll go ahead and play this for the listeners right now, and just listen very closely into the background a couple seconds after I start it. Alright, so right before he starts playing that piano again, I'll go back one more time and see if you guys can hear it. Yeah, right there. That's just, it's like mind blowing, and
I can't hear anything, but
yeah, that it is the songbird dying sound, like it is, and they have multiple examples of people's gameplay at that same spot. So it is a scripted event that a scripted sound Irrational put in there, and it is totally the sound of songbird dying, like. So just the thought that if that was intentional and Irrational was foresighted enough to put that in there for that very reason, or even if they just decided to play on that later down the road, I like to think that Ken Levine is a god and had this all preordained. I watched like a higher res version of it, and I could hear it it's just like a little like squeaking sound or whatever in the background. Yes. Yeah. And if you boost up the sound pretty high, it's clear if it's not the sound of songbird dying, it's just
big coincidence.
Yes, big coincidence. And like just the thought that at the end of the game, when at that moment when Elizabeth takes you and Songbird back and you're down in Rapture, that's taking place while the events of Bioshock 1 are going on. Like, that's, like, mind-blowingly awesome. Like, that was so cool.
That, to me, I mean, the ending it, figuring out with all the different doors and stuff like that was so awesome, but to me, opening your eyes and seeing Rapture has got to be one of the coolest things I've ever seen in a video game like that.
I think I am 95% certain that I had goosebumps the entire ending sequence and through the entire credits.
Yeah, my mouth was hanging open.
Oh yeah. I'm pretty sure I swallowed like 6 flies. Like, it was crazy. So yeah, I mean, that's wow.
Well, and it's funny. I mean, it's been cool, and it's been a blessing and a curse working at GameStop talking, because I mean, we talk about games all day to customers and to each other and all that stuff. And one of the guys I'm working with, he had beat it already. And I mean, obviously he was doing his best not to spoil anything. And I was telling a customer about it, and they were asking about, oh, so is this related to the original Bioshock? Because I really loved it. And I was like, no, it's nothing like that at all. And my coworker kind of like gives me a little look. And I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, stop. Word. Like, now, like, it all makes sense. I figured there was going to be some little nod or whatever to Bioshock, but nothing like this. Nothing like... Because it still is not in the same universe as Bioshock.
Yeah, it's not.
The actual Booker saving Elizabeth world is a different world than that.
Yeah, it's an... Yeah, it's a parallel universe. This is basically what a parallel timeline, and that's like whoa. And yeah, I guess that is a good transition into the whole doors and lighthouses thing, and how Elizabeth tells you near the end, there's always a man, there's always a city, there's always a lighthouse, and for every one of these parallel universes, there's always a man, always a city, always a lighthouse. So like Bioshock 1, there's a man, Rapture, and there's a lighthouse. Bioshock 2 obviously was a little different because it was more of just a continuation of Rapture.
Sure. That's also not. It also wasn't an irrational game. So
correct. Yes.
Considering that canon is even kind of. It wasn't Ken Levine's vision, and I mean, he is. Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite are his children. He wrote them. He created them himself.
Yeah. And like that's just and the number of because when geeks talk about parallel universes and timelines, the general consensus is that there are an infinite number of them, and there certainly seemed to be an infinite number of them.
Yeah, I mean, you looked out and saw the stars and thought they were different doors, you know.
Right, and just and I guess like the whole lighthouse correlation with stars. Obviously, lighthouses, what do? They shine light, and stars are dots of light. So it's entirely feasible that that correlation can be made. But just I'm curious, which lighthouses did you choose to go to?
I went left every time.
So did I.
Really?
That's interesting. That's very interesting. I went left every time.
Because I knew I'd be talking to you about this at some point. And I was kind of wondering, like, I wonder what Kyle would do. Because someone came... I mean, now I understand. There aren't different endings, because I feel like we would know if there were. Like, people would be clamoring on the internet talking about it, and it'd be impossible to avoid. Yeah. But a customer came in to talk about it, and because he had just beaten it that day and was like, and he's like, I'm not going to spoil anything, blah, 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 but I want to go back and play it because it looks like there are different endings. And I was like, shut your mouth right there. That's enough. I don't even want to know. Because when you're doing things in a game, you want to be making your choice. Right. You don't want to be thinking, if I make this choice, this is the probable outcome. If I make that choice, that's a probable... You know, you want to do what you want to do. I don't want to, in my head, say... oh, well, if I want to get this ending, I need to make this choice. I want to be living in the moment and doing what I feel like I need to be doing. Because in a lot of games, I don't do that. In Skyrim, like, I will do whatever I need to do to get that Daedric artifact. If I need to feed on another human being to get some stupid ring, toss me his leg or whatever. Like, if I'm in Mass Effect, if I, I want to reunite the Quarians and the Geth, even though the Quarians are retarded, they all deserve to be wiped out. It's their own damn fault. But I want to do it because I want to get the good ending. You know what I mean?
Right.
But in Bioshock, like, it's a separate, singular experience, and that just shows the quality of the storytelling, that I'm invested enough in the characters, invested enough in the circumstance that I'm making these choices for me.
Right.
I'm not making them as a gamer controlling a character in a video game.
Mm-hmm.
I'm making the choices for myself, for what I think is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And so, when he was like, oh, there are different endings, I was like, if there are, I don't even want to know that there are different endings, because I don't want that to influence the outcome. And so as I'm going and seeing the different avenues, because he had made that comment, it took me out of it a little bit, and I was like, well, I wonder if, if there are different paths, and I was like, no, and so I just went left every time, because I'm left-handed, and so I figured, what the hell? If I were in that situation, given two options to go left or right, I would go left.
Yeah.
So that's what I did. Not knowing where either one is going to lead, I'd go left. And so then when it came up with another fork, I was like, okay, I'm just going to go left every time, because that feels like something that I should do. And so that's what I did, and whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it all leads to the same place, but that doesn't take away the choice.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It doesn't. Not at all.
The choice is the important part, not the end outcome. Because I bet you a lot of people stood that when they gave that first left-right turn. I bet you a lot of people stood there for a couple minutes trying to make up their mind, and that's that's the important part of it. That's what makes it cool. It's not like getting to that point, and on the left, Elizabeth is standing there, and on the right, like, your baby is standing there, or whatever.
Right.
To give you, like, am I going to choose Elizabeth, or am I going to choose go back in time and change the whole thing? It's just a left or right. You have no idea what the outcome's going to be. Mm-hmm. The only choice is left or right. Yeah. And I just think that's really powerful.
Oh, yeah. It's, yeah, like, I thought I should have stood there and thought about it, but I just went with my gut, and that was to go left. And I don't know why. I still don't know why. I think it might have been because that lighthouse was farther, and so I decided to go to the farther lighthouse.
And that's just as valid. Like I said, that's the whole point.
Right.
Your reasons for choosing that's what's interesting.
Correct. Yes. And that is just, it's such a simple thing, and yet it has that kind of power. I think we can close the door on that section. We need to move on to some other stuff. Vigors versus tonics, and subsequently salts versus Eve. My personal thoughts are, I didn't notice a difference. I really didn't.
Kind of 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other. They're effectively the same.
Right, but thinking about it, having had our conversation thus far about how there's always a man, there's always a city, there's always a lighthouse.
Sure.
Why do they have to be different?
Yeah.
Like, there's Rapture, and then there's Columbia. There's Vigors, and there's tonics, like salts and Eve. It's different names for the same thing. A rose by any other name is still a rose.
Yeah.
I think I hadn't actually thought about that when I had written down the idea to talk about it, but I think that's a perfectly valid viewpoint, if I do say so myself, of course. But which vigors did you find most invigorating?
It depended on the situation. One thing I really liked, I mean, going now more into the gameplay, which to me is like secondary in this game, but I liked that a lot of the heavies were immune to certain ones. Mm-hmm. A lot of them were immune to crows, the Washington guys were immune to crows, the crow guys obviously were immune to crows. I thought that was really cool because if you found yourself using one vigor more than another, it kind of forced you to change up your tactics a little bit, which I liked. I kind of use everything just so that I could use everything.
Right, right.
I ended up I probably used Devil's Kiss the most because I upgraded it to have like more AoE damage.
Yeah,
it was really useful against large groups of guys,
right,
and against the heavies because it does a lot of damage.
Yeah.
In the late game, because up until the late game when you're jumping from like blimp to blimp, or airship, I guess, I wasn't really using Undertow often at all, just because it didn't really do damage. And I know you could upgrade it or hold it or whatever to drag guys to you, but I never really saw the need for that.
Right.
But I used it a lot at the end to chuck those guys off of their ships.
That's a good idea.
It was really useful for that. And I liked to experiment with the combinations, because I didn't even think about the fact that there were combinations until I threw crows at a group of guys and then chucked a fireball and saw the crows light on fire.
Right.
And then saw that little like indicator pop up of like whatever the trophy was.
1 out of 8 combinations.
1 out of 8. And I was like, so I should probably experiment with this.
Right, right.
So I messed around with a lot of different ones, and some of them really made sense, like doing the possession and then hitting them with electricity makes your possessed guy shock everything and that kind of stuff. But a lot of them I didn't think about, like doing the bucking bronco and then charge, like makes like everything explode, which is really cool. But I don't know. I mean, a lot of them were really useful for different situations. Like I said, the big guys, if you want to do damage, Devil's Kiss was great. If there are a bunch of guys, the crows were great. If you can throw them off the ledge, Undertow is great. If you're fighting one of those George Washington guys and a bunch of dudes doing the return to sender is great. All that kind of stuff. If they're hiding behind cover, use Breaking Bronco. And that's kind of the point, You have all these different vigors for different situations. And I think the fact that I used them all is testament to the sound design, because there weren't any that were just kind of useless. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
Yeah.
I found myself and I really wish I hadn't done this, but I wanted to trophy whore the hell out of all the weapon trophies my first time through.
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah.
And so I was just so absorbed in using the guns that I didn't play much with the vigors, and I do very much regret that. So my next playthrough, when I do it in 1999 mode, obviously I will have to use vigors quite a bit to save on ammo, and just because it's gonna be hard as hell. But I think I will enjoy playing with that a lot more.
So then what about guns? What did you find yourself using weapon-wise? I mean, I know you switched around a lot like I did to get the trophies, but once that last trophy popped, what did you end up sticking with for the end game kind of stuff?
And my favorite Call of Duty gun was the M14. Like just that single shot rifle. Wait, was that the M14?
Sure.
Sure. Whatever that single shot long range, mid to long range rifle is. So the carbine was probably my favorite. I thought I had a fairly competent degree of accuracy with it, where I could pull off headshots and do a decent amount of damage.
Yeah.
And for the times when that just was not quite cutting it, the hand cannon.
Yeah,
oh man.
I really loved the hand cannon, but I didn't end up using it hardly at all because I got the trophy really quick with it.
Yeah,
and that's why I was kind of going between things, and I didn't look ahead of time, which is fine. I mean, I shouldn't look ahead of time to figure out trophies. I just kind of did them as they came up. But I wish I would have known that you needed 150 assault rifle kills and 100 carbine kills.
Yeah.
Because everything else you needed like 30.
Right.
So I ended up racing through like the volley gun, the RPG, the crank gun, all those weapons really fast. And so for like probably, I mean, if you split the game into 4 quarters, for that entire third quarter, at least I was only using the assault rifle and carbine because those the last 2 I needed to finish up. But once I finished because I finished the carbine on that like final assault before you hop on his flagship. So that whole like last big, it's not really a boss battle, but that last where you're controlling the songbird kind of thing. And that whole big thing on his airship, I got to use whatever I wanted. And so I typically found myself sticking with the shotgun and volley gun. Because shotgun, I wanted to get up and close with a lot of the regular guys because I had melee upgraded to heal me when I killed them. So I was meleeing lots of dudes. Like I would melee shotgun, and it would kill pretty much any guy. And then the bigger dudes, I would use the volley gun on, the like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln guys.
Right.
Just because I could keep my distance that way, and it does a lot of damage. One of my coworkers really hated the volley gun because he said it like didn't do enough damage for him. But I upgraded the AOE and the damage on it, and like all that, and it was pretty gross, I thought. But I guess maybe not for everyone. I did switch on that last final assault. I did switch to the RPG because at that point, because Elizabeth chucks ammo at you whenever you need it.
Yeah.
And so
with the RPG, she gives you so much
does so much damage. And I would do the call Songbird down to like blast and kill a bunch of dudes at once, and then whatever was left over, I'd just chuck a couple RPGs down and kill everything.
Okay. See, I actually didn't call Songbird down to attack enemies at all. I had it solely dedicated to attacking all the airships that were coming in because I just felt like the cooldown was so long that I had to use it every single time on the airships and not waste any time with the guys that I personally could handle.
I mean, did you notice she does say like the cooldown is shorter for the smaller enemies.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's why I ended up using it on those, because it was just like 5-10 seconds.
Okay.
It called it down like on one of the 3 spots on the ship. And I mean, it would take out, like, I would wait for, there'd be 2 George Washingtons and like 4 or 5 foot soldiers in one area. I'd call it down, and Songbird would pretty much take them all out in one strike. And then 10 seconds later, I can send her on the ship. So that was pretty useful. There was, like, I did have moments of panic, though, because I would, like, send Songbird after one of the airships, and then it's in cooldown, and, like, I'm just getting barraged by the other big, like, the big blimp in the distance. And I can't do anything to that because like I tried to shoot my RPG and it just does so minimal damage. So I'm just kind of running away, waiting for Songbird.
That's definitely.
Going off of that, because one of my, if not my biggest complaint about the original Bioshock was that final boss battle. It was just, part of it was because they let you set up before starting it. So it was just always super easy for me because I just used the cheese tactic of taking like a propane tank, throwing a couple mines on it, and then just leaving those scattered around. So anytime he tries to like come after you, he blows himself up, or I can just telekinesis it at him. So that was like, it was a trivial boss fight, and it was also, it felt very out of place. Like, that belonged in like a Duke Nukem game, or like Gears of War. He's just like, he's all buffed up on steroids, and I don't know, it didn't fit right. The Big Daddies were enough boss battle for me, and that's what I really did, because there wasn't a boss battle, you know. There was no final battle with Comstock. There was no big battle with Songbird. It was just survive a couple waves of dudes, and that was enough. You know what I mean? There's
absolutely
going on. You're getting hit by these blimps in the distance. You're fighting 3 motorized patriots at once. That was enough for me, you know, a couple RPG shots and all that business. So I really liked that they changed that, and that once you finish that thing, you still have another half hour of story to wrap up the game.
And I feel like that's why I didn't feel like it was lacking anything when it finished. I felt I was definitely very somber when the credits stopped rolling, but I felt like I had a very, very complete experience. Like, I felt very, very satisfied, and I did not for 1 minute regret my purchase.
Well, I mean, I knew I wouldn't. I could have ended up super disappointed, but that thought never even crossed my mind of like, oh, I might not end up liking this game, just because everything I saw about it, even take out all the like kind of cheesy marketing of, I mean, it's just them trying to appeal more to a mass audience to sell more copies, and that's fine, but they make it look like a first-person shooter.
Right.
And that's not what this game is at all. And
no.
I imagine that a lot of people that are going to buy this thinking it's just a first-person shooter are going to end up not enjoying it, because it's not... you can play it fast if you want, but you're not getting the full experience out of it that way.
No.
And for those people, it's not going to end up being a short game, but I don't know. I just feel like it's going to leave some people unfulfilled because they're going to come to it thinking it's Call of Duty, and it is nothing like Call of Duty. I mean,
no, not at all.
The shooting and the aiming is serviceable. It is definitely not the highlight of the game.
Right.
And
right.
it's the same way with Bioshock 1. Like, the controls are solid, but they're not Call of Duty. That's why Call of Duty sells so many copies. Like,
right.
Its single player may be short and cheesy and lame and all those bad things that I'm so sick of, but the thing it gets right is the shooting.
Yeah.
And Bioshock, it does fine, but it's not going to win any awards for its gameplay, per se.
I don't think so.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't talk to anyone that hasn't liked it yet, but I get people coming in my store all the time that did not enjoy the first Bioshock because it was too slow for them. And those people are not gamers. Like, I'm sorry. If you don't like Bioshock because it was too slow, fuck you. I don't know what else to say. It's just, I don't know. Because if you play Call of Duty and Madden every year, no, you're not going to like Bioshock, but you're not a fucking gamer. Like, that's all I have to say about that. It gets my panties in a bunch when people talk stuff, because it's like that your opinion is invalid. It doesn't make it wrong. You're allowed to have whatever opinion you want, and I'm sure there are people out there that didn't like Bioshock for legitimate reasons.
Yeah.
Like, if the gameplay wasn't up to snuff, if they didn't particularly enjoy the story, I think they're crazy, but whatever. Their opinion is valid. But for people that, like, so what games do you play? What was the last game you bought? Oh, I got Black Ops 2, man. I'm super excited for the next DLC for it. The map pack's pretty sweet. I played Battlefield for a while, and I play Assassin's Creed. That's pretty much it. Then, no, like, whatever. You're not a gamer. You're no more a gamer than my girlfriend who plays The Sims on her iPad, like, or Angry Birds. Like, I'm sorry. You might play a couple video games, but you are not a gamer. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it just makes me not care about your opinion at all.
So, back on track.
End of that rant. No,
yes.
But okay, getting back on track, yeah.
Yep, I'm hitting the gong.
It is, I don't know how I went off on that diatribe, but it is applicable to this of a lot of the complaints are going to be from people who this game is not for. Yes. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and that is totally okay. We just don't want to hear it. So, we talked about the vigors, we talked about the weapons, the skyhook. This, I personally, it didn't feel gimmicky, it just felt unneeded.
Yeah, there were some story moments where you use it, like where it forces you to use it.
They were very few and far between, and I felt unnecessary.
In actual combat situations, the only time I used it was to run away. Yeah. And it was useful for that, don't get me wrong, right. And I know you can, like, when you're on it, you can press forward to go faster on it, all that kind of stuff. You can dismount at any time, and I liked doing the, whatever, skyhook attacks from it. Those were cool and, like, graphic, but it just, it was hard to aim on it. And I bet you, I'm sure on PC it's a lot easier because you have a lot more control over your aiming, but just using my right thumbstick to aim with something like a shotgun or an assault rifle, I couldn't have that snap aiming that I did when I'm using the left stick to move, right? Like when I'm on a set path, it's an on-rail sequence, literally. Yeah. Like, and that makes aiming not as good. For, like, when I was using the volley gun or an RPG, it was fine because that has splash damage, so you don't need to actually hit the guy to kill him. Right. But I mean, I never used it unless it was to run away from a handyman, basically.
Yeah. I found that as a melee weapon, it was more interesting than the wrench and more convenient because you didn't have to switch to it. But the executions with it were pretty brutal.
Yeah, I didn't find myself using those a whole lot just because if I was up close and personal and hitting them with the skyhook, it did so little damage. And I mean, I'm sure there like is gear that you can upgrade it for or whatever, but I would just use it to stun and then shoot the guy.
Yeah.
Like I did a couple executions, but it just straight up just melee did so little damage for me that I didn't really utilize it a whole lot, unless
Right.
I was like stuck up against a wall with a guy coming at me.
Yeah. And because you can get that, I forget if it's like a hat or a vest or whatever, that you can equip that does like electroshock damage when you melee.
I had that equipped
That's
for a
super
while.
useful, yeah.
Until I changed that out once I got the one for to heal you with melee. But yeah, I used the shock
Okay.
one for a while.
Yeah.
And it was very useful. It's just, I don't know. I would rather shoot a guy in the face with my shotgun than melee him 4 or 5 times.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about the weapons, tonic, skyhook, all that kind of stuff. Let's get back to some more story beat things. Some more story-centric conversation. Elizabeth's powers, obviously, she opens tears, she travels through. It is a gateway through space and or time. It is not, from what I was able to take out of the game, in my experience, the origin of her powers is still a mystery to me. Did you pick up anything, or?
No, I mean, until you were talking about it a little bit before we started recording, I hadn't even really thought about the fact that it wasn't explained. It's just, I felt like it's just one of those, like, it was a God-given ability for her to do.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe we missed something. Maybe there was a little bit of an explanation for it somewhere that I just didn't, like a voxophone that I didn't find, or like a story beat where I wasn't paying attention, but I just kind of took it for what it was. Like, it's just something that she can do.
Yeah. It created the question in my mind of how Comstock knew she had this power when she was just a baby and probably couldn't even control it, or didn't even... Well, see, the difficult thing there is the scene where Comstock steals, or he gives Comstock the baby. He gives him baby Elizabeth, and there's a tear open that they go through.
Yeah, they were using a machine to do it, because he's shouting, "Turn off the machine," and that's when her pinky gets cut off.
Right. And so it just makes me wonder how Comstock knew Elizabeth could do this, or did they give Elizabeth this ability?
That's kind of what I'm thinking now, is that
And
they were experimenting on her from childhood.
Right.
That, yeah, I think they gave her that ability.
And it could be that she met a certain set of genetic markers that they needed, or it could be as simple as Booker was in debt, needed to get out of debt. He had a kid. They needed a kid. Well, I'm calling in my favor. Like, it could be that simple. Like, it, and that's something I wish I knew more about. And segue, what I wish they will address in their subsequent DLC releases is a little bit flesh that out, not too much, because part of the fun of Bioshock is the mystery and the conversation and the imagination, but I just wish I had something to go off of on that as far as DLC goes, because I do have the season pass, because GameStop was doing the thing. Is this a permanent thing now where if you pre-order both the guide and the season pass, you get one for free?
No, that was just a special for Bioshock.
Okay, all right. Because that was very handy. But I foresee them coming out with some, like they did with the previous Bioshock, like some extra vigors and a couple extra weapons. There will be that kind of crap. I know you and I had you briefly mentioned that you figured they might do some sort of like a puzzle room thing like they did with the first one. Or
yeah, I don't know what that would
maybe.
be, because this game didn't really have puzzles in it.
Right.
I mean, and that's honestly something I missed a little bit of, because the original Bioshock didn't have a whole lot of puzzles in it, but most of the puzzle solving was like hacking turrets and cameras.
Yeah.
But that was actually a nice kind of diversion there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I would have preferred it, but the whole lock picking thing, where it's an ability, a coincidental ability that Elizabeth happens to have, and it happens to be a coincidence that a lot of important doors are locked in Columbia.
Yeah.
And you find these lock picks everywhere. That's fine for these, because behind those rooms were always like the upgrades, their gear, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would have preferred it, but it would have been interesting to have some sort of interactive lock picking.
Yeah.
I don't know, like somehow if you're helping Elizabeth do it in some way, like the lock picking in Skyrim or a lot of these RPG games. I don't know if I would have enjoyed it or not, but it would have been interesting. I'd be curious to know if they played around with anything like that.
Yeah, it would have been better than just sitting there watching her do it.
Totally. Because, I mean, granted, I also hacked everything in Bioshock, and so I did that little minigame a lot, and it got old by the end, but that's because I was doing it so much. But it was a nice little diversion that made my brain think in a little bit different way.
Right, yeah, it flexed that other part of your brain that was not getting a workout otherwise.
Right. So, I don't know. I will be very curious to see what kind of DLC they have, because they've said it's single-player DLC.
Right, there's not going to be a multiplayer for the game. Yeah,
but they didn't really specify if it's going to be weapons or vigors or an additional story or what. But it could be anything. The ending is open-ended enough.
Yes.
With all these doors, all these different Bookers and Elizabeths.
Right.
There could be something with that.
Yeah, and that's interesting to see if they would address that in a DLC, or if that's their way of saying, look, we can make whatever the fuck scenario we want for the next Bioshock. Like, this is where the series is going to be going from now on. That's partially what I took from it.
As long as there's a man,
a city, a lighthouse. Yeah.
We can talk about this in a couple minutes of where we think the series is going to go from here. But shoot, I forgot what I was going to say about that. Did you saw the little thing after the credits? Yes.
Yes. The scene. It was, interestingly enough, I had just watched Monsters Inc. For the 1000th time with my roommate Cody, and that very much reminded me of the last scene in Monsters Inc. where he goes through the door. Yes.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was a very interesting thing for me to my brain kind of made that connection there.
But I'm very curious about that, because that was the whole ending of this, to stop Anna or Elizabeth from being imprisoned, to stop Columbia from happening, all this terrible stuff. Booker had to die, and in every universe he dies or whatever.
Right.
Whatever your interpretation of that is. But then at the end, he wakes up and he's there, and we don't see Anna in the crib, but we're led to believe that Anna's in that crib.
Yeah. Is there a noise? Does she make a noise?
You can hear her kind of like
cooing.
Yeah, cooing. Yeah.
Okay. I couldn't remember.
So I mean, I assume that kind of thing I don't want to see them address, because that's the open-ended, your interpretation kind of ending that doesn't get to happen enough in video games or film,
I agree.
Any medium like that, because people need finality. It's just kind of the society we live in.
Yeah, it's always a very bold move for a developer or a director to put that on the audience.
Yeah. So I don't know, like that kind of thing I don't want to know. Because just having beaten it a couple hours ago, I still need my brain to give a little time to process and formulate an opinion on what I think that all means.
Right.
But for DLC, I think something with the Latouche or however you pronounce that brother and sister, the woman who uses the technology. Something with them back in time, well, quote unquote, back in time in that universe would be interesting to learn a little bit more about them.
Yeah, I agree.
And how that all began, I think would be really cool. But if it's any kind of single player DLC, I feel like you need to play as Booker, because this was the journey you went on it. You went on it with him, so I don't know what they would do with that.
Yeah, that's the tough part is,
You have to imagine when they announce this that they're going to have 3 pieces of single player DLC with a season pass. They have to already have ideas.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
So you have to, I'm sure there's something planned and it's going to be awesome. I hope it's not just more weapons and vigors.
Yeah, same. I would be very sad. I expect one of them to be.
Yeah.
But if more than one of them is extra weapons and vigor, I will be very disappointed. Mm-hmm. I think. I won't be angry, just a little let down, a little somber about it. Because I will give Irrational as much money as I have for whatever they want to put out. But there is definitely a specific set of things that I wish the DLC would address. And if it doesn't, I'm sure I will be very sad. Mm-hmm. Just like I am at the end of a great book series or a great TV series. Sure. There's these questions. It always makes me sad not to know them, know the answer to them. So that's all the DLC stuff that I wanted to talk about. Let's see. We can kind of avoid that one. But let's talk about the whole... At the end, pretty much the very end, Booker and Comstock being the same person. Elizabeth, the Elizabeth is make allusions to that. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that first before I voice my own.
I kind of saw it coming. Like, it wasn't that I was sitting there playing it thinking, oh, you know what? I bet you Booker and Comstock are the same person. But it was one of those, like, I knew it all along moments of when it was revealed. I think when the first light bulb came up was when you confront Comstock and Booker's, like, yelling at him and that whole business. That's when it started to feel weird. Like, because all this time, you hear Comstock over the radio, you hear these voxophones, all this stuff, but you don't have, like, I don't think you have any actual interaction with him, or do you earlier in the game?
I don't think you do. Does he... I can't remember if in the beginning of the game he is the one who baptizes you.
I don't believe so.
No? Okay.
But anyway, that's when it felt weird to me, and I was putting the pieces together, and then that reveal happens, like, shortly there afterwards.
Right.
But, like, once it did get revealed, it was a moment of, like, I knew it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, it all made sense. It wasn't like in the original Bioshock where when you figure out the whole "would you kindly" thing, where it was like, holy shit, yeah, he was saying that the whole time.
Yeah.
This was more of a moment of like, no, you're Comstock, and it's kind of like, I know. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but that's
it's like
I can do.
Yeah, it's like it's one of these. It's like you're in denial of something truly, truly horrible, and someone finally says something to you.
Yeah, they break through that wall.
And you can't be like, oh yeah, that's right, I am this way. It's like, shit, I am this way. Like, I know. Damn it. And I guess just the hard thing, the part that's hard for my mind to wrap around is Comstock physically Booker and vice versa, or are they metaphorically each other?
And neither and both.
Neither or and both. Yeah, that sounds like a Bioshock answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like an irrational answer, Shea.
Because I think that's part of the point is, well, because one of the things that also, when I was having those thoughts of like, could Booker be Comstock but that doesn't make sense. Booker's not old enough to be Elizabeth's father. But I wasn't thinking about the different parallel worlds and tears and all that stuff. Because like when that scene where you're in that universe and you see Elizabeth and she's like old, and he, Comstock has destroyed New York or whatever city it is that you see. I hadn't put those pieces together that, yes, there are these parallel worlds, but they're not all on the same spot in time.
Right.
Like when you go to Rapture, if that is happening when Bioshock is taking place, that's 30 years later, right? Or when was Bioshock? When it was in 1960 that you go there?
Yes.
I think. Yeah, because it was New Year's Eve 1950 when shit went to hell, and that was 10 years later when you went there.
Right.
Yeah, so that was, I mean, almost 50 years later.
Right.
And you're there at the same time as everyone else, because you can see the Big Daddy and the little sister through like the little glass in the distance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then obviously the whole, if this is what they intended in the Bioshock 1, the whole sound of Songbird dying during the death of Fitzpatrick, obviously those line up when the events of Bioshock 1 are taking place, which is in the 60s. So, yeah, it is brain-meltingly complex, but at the same time, it makes sense, and it's just, you just kind of have to go with it.
Yeah. One thing I did kind of smack myself in the head for not realizing was AD being Anna DeWitt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I felt like that was one of those where I was like, I should have put those pieces together, just because they say Anna several times throughout the game.
Right. Yeah, because he's always saying Anna. Yeah.
I always thought that was his wife, because they have that little conversation with Elizabeth where she's like, "Yeah, are you married?" And like, I was. Well, do you have kids? No. And I was like, okay, so his wife died, and the kids, something happened there, but I don't know if we're going to figure that out or not. Obviously, now we know what happened, but I always thought Anna was his wife. Okay. And I thought that was going to play a part somehow, but I was wrong.
Yeah. I don't know why that never crossed my mind that she could be his wife. I always assumed it was a daughter of his. That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know why I wouldn't have thought it was his wife, but I don't know why. Spooker comes up same person. Just two more things. First one being, Big Daddies were once humans, and they were made into those abominations. Big Sisters, same thing. Handyman, same thing. Songbird. What do you think? Do you think Songbird was once a human or a bird? Like, what do you think?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the Songbird is very analogous to the Big Daddy with its little sister. Like it is not only Elizabeth's protector, but it's kind of her warden as well.
Very much so, yes.
With the little sisters, the Big Daddies are there to protect them, but there is a sense of the little sisters have a little bit of a fear of them. Yeah. Like when they're attacked, they go to the Big Daddy for protection, but it's not a completely symbiotic relationship.
Right, yeah, it's not.
And that's totally how Elizabeth is with the Songbird.
Very much so, yes.
Really, until the end, it seems like all Elizabeth has for Songbird is fear. She does these things to try to placate it, but not because she loves it.
Right.
But it's not until the very end when it's underwater and dying that she kind of has to forgive and let it go. But she does. She chooses to kill it. She chooses to take them to that universe underwater and have it drown.
Yeah. Instead of just trapping it somewhere.
Yeah.
Or just getting it farther away from them, she does make a conscious decision to kill it.
So I don't know. I mean, its wings are mechanical. You can see gears on them.
Yeah.
But that's not to say that it wasn't a bird at one time.
Right.
But yeah, man, I don't know. I think it's because it has feelings.
Yeah,
I think it is a machine in the way that Big Daddies are machines, because they're no longer human, right? They go through all this testing and like drugs and experiments and all this stuff, and they lose a huge part, if not all of their humanity. That's why Bioshock 2 is
Right.
interesting, because you are this big daddy that holds on to a piece of
Right.
that humanity
Yeah.
for his daughter.
And that's what really draws the line between your character and the rest of them in the second game, is
Yeah.
that shred of humanity you still have. But I feel like Songbird and the Big Daddies are different because Songbird, I guess the reason I feel they're different is because Big Daddies, Big Sisters, they, even in the name, they are human. But Songbird is an animal. Animals don't have souls to begin with, or so, depending on your beliefs.
Right.
Common conception of that is common perception of that is animals don't have souls. This Big Daddy and the Big Sisters, they had souls and they were stripped from them. The Songbird, it never really had a soul, so I feel like it's I feel like less was lost in the transition between organic matter to metal. I feel like less was lost there, and it retained more of itself somehow, I feel like. But then, because I guess animals have a motherly instinct kind of thing about them, and obedience, you can certainly train them. I just feel like it shows more than that, though. Like, more than an animal.
Oh, totally.
And that...
I mean, it comes when it's called, but it clearly, well, I was going to say clearly it thinks for itself, but in a way it doesn't.
Right.
'Cause, I mean, when Booker takes a hold of the pipe or whatever and tells the Songbird to attack the tower, it does, without even thinking. And that Songbird has no love for Booker.
No.
So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you're supposed to draw those comparisons between the Big Daddy and the Songbird just because of how it looks, for one, but also like the fact that its eyes are green and yellow and then to red when it sees Booker. Like, that's all the same as Big Daddy's. It's supposed to be analogous. But I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up about with the souls, because I would argue that if Songbird was a bird and it didn't have a soul, maybe it was given one.
Okay.
Because it doesn't care for Elizabeth because it has to. It cares for Elizabeth because it wants to.
Right.
It protects her when she calls it, or when something else calls it. Because it protects Columbia is what its original intention was.
Yeah.
But it clearly wants to protect Elizabeth specifically.
Yeah.
Not just because it's been forced to, but because it wants to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's just a tough one to wrap your head around. But yeah, I mean, it's a very, very interesting point that it may have been given a soul of sorts. That's very interesting. So last item on the list I have here, the city being held up by a form of particles, not the balloons themselves. So it's not a floating city in the sense that it appears to be visually. There's actually sort of, in the same way that vigors and tonics are science but magic, I feel the particles are science yet magic.
Sure.
And I feel like they aren't talked about very specifically, and they don't go into much detail about it, but I feel like they are presented that way. And that it's interesting to have like it's. And we talked about how grounded the culture of Columbia felt just in its depth and how we perceive it. But to have this, like later in the game, you learn... I forget, is that later in the game that Elizabeth mentioned something? I feel like it is a little bit later.
About what?
About the particles.
Oh, I think that's in a voxophone later on.
Oh, is it? Okay.
When you're learning more about the Latouses.
Okay, sure.
Is that what it is? Latouche? Do they say? Or is it Latouche?
I'm not sure on the pronunciation. I'm pretty bad with names. But yeah, it's just interesting. You have this grounded view of this culture, and then later in the game, I personally felt it was almost flip-flopped for me a little bit, and it became just something else with this knowledge that this science of a mythical proportion was driving and powering this city.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't feel like it bled through into the culture. I feel like.
Well,
I didn't get that sense the entire game up till that point when I learned that. I didn't feel that. I'm not entirely sure what I'm trying to say, I guess.
no, I mean, I think I understand, because you see this, we'll call it magical science, in the technology that keeps the city afloat and in the technology that fuels the tonics, or vigors rather. But you don't see that anywhere else. You don't see it in their date. Like, they're still mopping the floor with mops. They're still using guns that have bullets.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff. I think that a lot of that stems from the whatever female Latouche and her twin brother or whatever being from, I mean, because the brother was from this separate parallel universe.
Right.
There's something special about them specifically. Like there was something special about Elizabeth specifically, that they can harness this, they can make this work. And then like they disappeared. They knew too much, so Comstock, quote unquote, killed them. And then they come in from alternate dimension to try to help Booker.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it's because Columbia has a fear of the future. Despite the fact that it built the city to save the future, it has a fear of advancement in any way.
Yeah,
that's why it
clings onto
the
things.
black man down.
Yeah, exactly, like
the
slavery
Irish
and
down.
everything. It's clinging to those old ways, certainly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's part of it, but that's one of those like I'm making this up as I go along. Nothing. It's just I'm reading into it. You know what I mean? There's nothing that's telling me that's what it is.
Yeah. There's nothing concrete about it.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's what makes this stuff interesting to talk about. Is because it's not based upon fact. We're inferring into this universe.
Yeah. That's. I cannot imagine another universe I would rather infer into than Bioshock.
Yeah.
It's oh man. I now feel, having beaten Infinite, I really want to go back and play the first one again. I don't want to play the second one though. I don't, and because it just wasn't as good, and it wasn't the same. But I totally want to go play the first one.
I would go back and play the second one. I beat it, but I didn't even beat some of the like side quest things.
Yeah.
Just because I just wanted to get it over with, because I just didn't care anymore.
Right. Yeah.
But maybe I'll go back and play the first one again, and then it'll make me want to try Bioshock 2, because I have it for free because of PlayStation Plus. So
okay, sure.
I just don't have. It's like a 14 gig install, so I don't know how I'm supposed to make enough room.
Yeah.
But if you don't have any more topics, I have one.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think this is a good place to end on this topic. Is where would you like to see Bioshock go next? What would you like to see in the next Bioshock game, assuming there is one?
Oh man, that's very difficult, because I just have this connection now with Booker, and I want to see more Booker, but the nature of the events of Bioshock Infinite, I'm very conflicted about that. I do want to see more. Like, the nerd inside of me is like, more canon, more canon, more canon, but I almost feel like I just want to let him be at peace and rest now. And if that happens, frankly, I have no idea what to expect from the next Bioshock. The only thing I know to expect is a man, a lighthouse, and a city. That's all I got. Like, and frankly, that's okay. Like, just give me a man, a lighthouse, and a city. I'm fine with that. Like, make it It's just tie it into the universe the way Infinite was tied into the universe, and I will be infinitely satisfied. I think I don't think I need really anything more than that. Personally, I'll be grateful for more than that, but I don't need anything more than that. Personally.
Yeah, I was talking to someone, a customer at work, just about where I thought the next game would go. Before, I mean, and it was interesting, kind of the way we were talking about it was very much of what they set up of a Mana City, a lighthouse.
Yeah.
Obviously, I didn't know that this game had a lighthouse in it, taking all that stuff, but just because Bioshock and Bioshock Infinite created these unique cities that are in places you would not expect.
Yes.
Like, it's not Bioshock happens in New York City. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
It's
right.
And so what would be the next interesting new place for a city to be that you would never think of? That's the whole problem, is you would never think of it. Like,
right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if Ken Levine or anyone at Rational has ideas for the next one. I don't know if they're going to make the next one.
Right, yeah. No one knows.
Who knows? This could be the end. This could be the last Bioshock. I thought the original Bioshock was going to be the last Bioshock. So
yeah.
Who the hell knows? But I don't know. I mean, like you said, even you said earlier, just with the lighthouses, it's infinite possibilities for other stories.
Yeah.
But if there's going to be another Bioshock, we know there's going to be a man, a lighthouse, and a city.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want there to be a next one, just because I'm sure they can come up with something really awesome.
Yeah.
And have it tie into this in an interesting way, because they can't do this reveal again, right? Of when you wake up as Booker in Rapture, it was like, oh my God, these universes are connected. They're not the same. It's not like Columbia, because one person's thing was, and they were stupid. I'm whatever. I was kind of like, oh yeah, that'd be interesting when they said it. But of like, because Columbia happens first, of, well, what if Columbia sinks into the bottom of the ocean? And I was like, okay, but no.
But no.
So like, they can't do that reveal again of these are connected.
Right.
Because if they do another game where you're playing as a dude and you're going to some crazy city and you start out in a lighthouse, everyone knows they're connected.
Yeah.
So that can't be the... Because that was the big reveal. It wasn't that Booker is Elizabeth's dad. It wasn't that she was the baby. She's Anna. That was not the big reveal. The big reveal was...
Its connection to the universe.
This infinite world of worlds that are the same but different. Yeah. And they can't repeat that. So I don't know. I mean... Like I said, a big part of me is totally fine if they don't make another Bioshock game, because heaven forbid they mess it up. Like they make something and it is just bad, or it ties in a poor way, and it ruins the kind of feeling that we have now of how it's cool it is that all these things are connected. But I have faith in Ken Levine that if, in a year and a half he announces Bioshock Lighthouse or whatever the hell it would be called, I will be just as excited as I was for Bioshock Infinite.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I think we have talked just about all we can talk about Bioshock.
Well, I'm sure we can talk for plenty longer, but it's been over an hour. So.
Yes, I think people are tired of listening. Could be tired of listening. But so hopefully all of you listeners out there enjoyed the conversation. This will be on YouTube, as you know, so feel free, if you have corrections for us, please list them in the comments below. If you have opinions, put your theories about where you think the series will go. Throw them down in the comments. I'm very active with my subscriber base and my comment sections. I love having conversations with you guys. So please give us some feedback. Let us know where your thoughts are at, and all that kind of good stuff. But Shea, thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
For talking. I always love our conversations. Always do. Always have. Always will. I will catch you guys on whatever video I upload next. Bada boom, bada bang.